So nice to have you all here. The first meeting where we're moving into having a speaker series where we'll have a 30-minute presenter. In this case, it's Marco, which it's really wonderful to have you here. And then we'll have 20 minutes or so for conversation and see what topics emerge. Marco, thank you so much for your availability, and the floor is yours.
Nice to meet you all. So for those of you who don't, my name is Marco Salsiccia. I'm currently working as a mobile accessibility leader at Intuit. And I used to work at DQ Systems and also was an accessibility specialist at Lyft. Prior to losing all of my vision in 2014, I used to be a senior animator and a visual effects artist and a motion graphics designer. I also did quality assurance engineering for a software company. I studied media arts and computer animation here in San Francisco, and I'm calling in from Oakland. And after losing my vision, I really didn't think I'd be able to sort of interact with the art world again. I wasn't able to make anything visual. I just sort of put everything away, gave up, and started working in finding a new career in accessibility. That was kind of going on up until I met Chancey Fleet from the New York Public Library at NFB, the National Federation of the Blind Conference in 2022, where she was giving a presentation on tactile art and graphics and creation techniques. So just by meeting her and learning about the sensational blackboard that Anne Cunningham created, I was able to reconnect to my artistic side and learning how to draw again, making tactile drawings with a tactile drawing surface. And also, Chancey introduced me to concepts of scalable vector graphics code and using that in order to make digital graphics and tactile graphics. And from there, I created the website blindsvg.com, which teaches anyone who's blind or low vision how to build their own, hand code their own SVG graphics to build their own tactile graphics, charts, diagrams, or anything that they want to make for tactile output. What I'm here to talk about today is a recent class that I held as part of the Andrew High School Braille and Talking Books Library virtual drawing course. Every other month, they kind of alternate. There's an in-person class in New York City, and then there's a virtual class, which is held for anyone worldwide to come in and just sort of sit down. And we go through a themed prompt for what we're going to be drawing. I guide people through how to start drawing on tactile surfaces like the sensational blackboard, or using the silpats, baking mats, magazines, newspapers, cardboard, just anything with a pliant surface that you can put a piece of paper on and draw with a ballpoint pen so you can be able to feel what's coming out on the paper drawing. Starting in 2023, we started holding teach-ins, starting in New York City at the Andrew Haskell branch, where we taught about 40 blind and low vision people how to do tactile drawing, following the curriculum that Anne Cunningham came up with, and then our little tactile group came together to become instructors to teach those ideas. At that teach-in, totally randomly, I think we were just finishing up and we were at dinner, and I happened to have the blackboard with me. I started drawing a bouncing ball, and a bouncing ball meaning that I was drawing a ball in several different stages of its falling from one position to the bottom part of a paper and bouncing back up in a series of drawings of circles on one sheet of paper. Because I was trying to illustrate some ideas about animation and how that was created, and what I used to do before I lost my vision. And we were kind of passing it around at this dinner table, and everyone was really interested in learning more about that motion. I had that idea in mind and finally had the opportunity to put it all sort of worked out in the end. I finally come up with an interesting way of teaching how to bring animation and concepts of animation, depicting graphics over time or changes over time, and just general motion to a blind and low vision creative audience. Basically, for a rundown of how I taught this in the class, we started off with everyone getting comfortable and ready, doing some warm-ups, drawing lines on whatever tactile surface that they had, getting used to moving the pen, getting used to kind of creating some shapes, especially circles, because we were going to be working a lot with circles for this day. We started off by talking about persistence of vision. So for those of you that don't know or are not familiar with concepts in animation, persistence of vision is what makes animation work for sighted people. When the eye is looking at something in motion, the brain is actually taking a series of images and interpolating it in them to have us perceive motion. And when we're creating animation at 24 frames per second, meaning that there are 24 drawings for each second of animation. And when you play them back at that rate, a sighted person will see something in motion. So essentially, when you're creating animation, you're tricking the eye into believing that something is real or something is moving with a series of drawings. To kind of illustrate that concept tactily, I thought of how to present that on one sheet of paper, following that same sort of off the cuff drawing that I did back at that dinner table back in New York. So I had everyone take a sheet of paper in landscape, so wider than it is tall, and then we folded it in half, like making a letter or like making a card. And then we folded that in half again, basically making 4 vertical columns on the sheet of paper once we unfolded it. So everyone could feel there are 4 vertical columns or three creases in the paper. And I started off with teaching gravity and acceleration. So each column was essentially becoming a time lapse set of drawings for a ball starting at the top of the page and falling downwards in that specific column. But we were learning through tactile exploration of how to depict that. So I had in the first column, I had everyone draw a circle, and these circles are about maybe like the size of a 50-cent piece in diameter, so about like an inch, a little inch and a half. Something very simple, so a person could rest their wrist on the board and just use their finger motion to draw a pretty simple circle. After they drew the circle, and kind of stepping back a bit, the way that we usually teach drawing a circle is you take your non-dominant hand and you point at the paper where you want the left edge of the circle to start. You put the tip of the pen against the tip of your finger, and then you draw the circle. You draw the circle up and around, back down and through and back towards your finger, and that's how you basically create a circle. With enough practice, you get used to it and you can do it without your finger. But once you've drawn the first circle, I had everyone kind of take their finger, point to that right edge of the circle or the top part of the circle, and then move their finger down 1 finger width. And then that was the start of their second circle. So if I were pointing at the left edge of the first circle, I would just slide my finger down 1 finger width, and that was the left edge of the second circle. We draw the second circle on top of the first, and that second circle is supposed to match the size and diameter of that first circle. Then for the third circle, we're going down 2 finger width, and then we draw the third circle. Then we go down 4 finger width, and we draw the circle again. So again, we're doubling the amount of times that we're moving our finger down, and we're altering the position of the next drawn circle, and basically showing how when a ball is at the top of a bounce, or when you drop a ball, gravity picks it up and accelerates it downwards. It's not a static rate. It just slowly gets picked up and then falls as it hits terminal velocity. But by feeling each of the individual circles and feeling how it's logarithmically moving downwards, you get a sense of that's how acceleration is depicted. So essentially, you have a time-lapse drawing of a ball falling. In the second column, we do the same thing again, where we draw a circle in the exact same position, but this time each of the finger widths, we start off with a 2 finger width drop, then a 4, then an 8, and we're depicting weight. So maybe the difference between a tennis ball falling and a bowling ball falling, where the heavier something is, you can depict it in a way that it's getting pulled down with a lot more force, and it accelerates a lot faster. The third column was a completely different take, where you drew a circle in the top, but each circle that you subsequently drew was only 1 or 2 finger widths down. We were showing a floaty, or like a floating experience, or a bubble, something without a lot of weight, without a lot of mass, that wasn't going to get affected by gravity. It's just something very slowly, easily, linearly falling down the page. And then the fourth column was at this stage, making sure they're checking in, making sure people were kind of understanding it. I had everyone, instead of drawing a circle, they could draw whatever shape they wanted and try using the finger width depiction, trying to make that shape fall. So falling stars, falling triangles, falling squares, just anything that they wanted to do. It was completely up to them to experience that, but also, again, use their tactile sensation to figure out where each shape was going to appear in this time lapse column of space and time. And once we completed that exercise, a lot of the folks in there were starting to get it. And even they were starting to surmise different ways of showing this, because we were only showing this essentially from one orthographic view, or from like looking straight on at a ball falling straight down. But they started thinking, well, how would I depict that if I was on top of the ball looking down at it, like a bird's eye view? And it's like, yeah, that's correct. And then I also spoke about how if you wanted to show something coming towards you, things would be growing in size at that same sort of single, double, double, double rate, depending on how fast you wanted to show it appearing. What this turned into then was the next step, where we got a fresh sheet of paper, and then we folded this one into eighths, so in half, and half, and in half again, and then unfolded everything, and then went back over our creases to make sure each crease was, you could easily feel each crease of the paper, and you can have 8 columns of the paper. But for this one, each column represented one single drawing. So we were no longer drawing a time lapse of one element going down. We were going to draw one ball, and each column was one frame of an animation of the same ball falling. So in the first column, we drew a circle, and then the second column, we drew the same circle. The fourth column is where the ball lands on the ground. And then we started talking about a little more of the fundamentals of animation. So the fourth column is where the ball lands on the ground. That means the ball's going to bounce back up. So we all kind of talked about how many frames would that take. So I had folks think, if 4 is where it lands on the ground and you want to make it bounce, in frame 6 or column 6, we looked at where the ball was drawn at the start in column 1. We looked at where the ball was drawn in column 4. We kind of assessed a halfway point between those two drawings, and that's where you drew the circle in column 6. Because when a ball generally bounces, it's going to bounce up half as high, and then bounce down and back at half as high, then half as high until it rolls on the ground. So 1 is the starting point, 4 is the floor, the 6 is where the ball is bouncing back up. That means that columns 5 and 7 is the ball kind of coming up to that peak position, and then again it's starting to accelerate back downwards. Essentially, columns 1, 4, and 6 became the keyframes, because for animation you always draw between keyframes. So you know that the ball's going to start in one position, you know it's going to land on the ground, and then you know it's going to bounce back up. And then in betweening, or tweens, are what you do to go between that, to show that animation and show that motion. Once everyone kind of got through this exercise the first time, what we did is we took you, and once it's all drawn out on your paper, you can kind of go in and maybe add a little more detail into the ball, like really kind of dig around through the circle, add some shading, do whatever you need. But when you place your hand flat on the paper and slide it across the paper, you started getting a tactile representation of the state of the ball in motion as it's bouncing up and down. You just kind of feel it under your hand as you get to each frame. And then we started doing more. So everyone started grabbing more paper, started doing more eighths, and started trying different weights of the ball dropping. A bowling ball wouldn't bounce half as high. A bowling ball would land on the ground and come up just a little bit. We talked about squash and stretch, where when the frame where the ball lands on the ground, you wouldn't draw it as a circle. You would draw it as a flattened oval, because maybe the ball has a little bit of give. And the folks that were attending the class really started understanding these concepts of animation. They were, a lot of them were really interested in comics. They were interested in anime. They were interested in animation. And this was something that was finally giving them some sense of how things are actually, looking when things are in motion, or how you can depict it in motion or feel it in motion. And essentially we came to understanding that if I had taken instead of having 8 columns on the paper, if I then had 8 sheets of paper and I was making one drawing on one sheet, then the drawing on the second sheet, then that drawing on that third sheet, and you just keep drawing one drawing per each sheet of paper, you now have, and you're feeling it tactily, you're feeling where it's supposed to go. You've now essentially created a tactile set of animation paper ready to be photographed or scanned in to be turned into an actual animation. We talked about some of my history with animation, how that used to work in class. People were really resonating with it and really enjoyed that. And where this really takes people, again, is it's one more way of demonstrating how to show something in motion, how to show how things change over time if you want to depict that, and not only for animation, but for comics or for just telling a visual story. And this can also translate well into digital animation. So if you're going to be building digital graphics in SVG, SVG has a full animation suite that you can toggle on using CSS and transition animation once you understand how fast it takes things to move or how subtle you want something to move. You can now sketch out exactly how you want something to move and then program that right into your SVG code. So there's a lot of interesting potential for this conceptual learning, and I want this to kind of propagate or more people to try this out. I actually personally bought animation paper and a peg bar for the first time. So for those of you who can see, I have like a peg bar. It's a metal peg bar that has 2 horizontal, I guess, pegs on the left and right side of this thin bar, and then a circular peg on the center. And then animation paper comes pre-punched with this exact pattern of pegs on it. So I'm going to try taping this to my sensational blackboard. And then that means that when I put a piece of animation paper on it, it will always be registered in the same location. So as I draw on each subsequent sheet of paper, the drawing is going to line up, or it's going to try to stay in the same spot. So when I scan it in and try turning it into an animation, it won't be jittery, it won't be moving all over the place. It'll all be registered to the same drawing location on the sheet of paper. Yeah, so that's in essence where I'm at in terms of the tactile animation experience that we had there, and I'm looking forward to teaching it more wherever I can.
Margaret, this is awesome. I'll just say that I think the way that you are working through these design strategies, right, and figuring out where and when that translation or that transmutation needs to happen to break down concepts that were visual versus, with animation, this idea of weight and movement, those are inherently kind of embodied concepts. So it's interesting to hear how you, as a group, identified strategies to make that more apparent. And also just to highlight, that it's not just in this space, but also your SVG work, that you've been exploring how these traditional media formats can actually be pathways into non-visual design.
My favorite part was just people were picking up on the concept as they went through it, and that was the important part. It's like self-discovery as well.
I'd like to say, Marco, thank you so much. I just learned a ton about animation. It was an amazing class, right?
Yeah.
I brainstorm with you on some ideas too.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot to mention that we talked about it was also a way to recount some of the history that I had as a student and what goes into it. Timing was also another one. And that's something that we can kind of play with as blind folks as well, where if I wanted to act out how I want the ball to fall, I can just hold an imaginary ball in my hand and then make my hand bounce on the table, dropping my arm and letting it bounce, and then kind of paying attention to how long it takes to go from the top to the bottom, how long it takes to go from there to the bounce where it's going to bounce up. And then by paying attention to that timing and thinking about those 24 frames a second, you can break everything down into exactly how many drawings you need and where each drawing is going to land in order to do exactly what you've just acted out.
Marco, this is got the animation piece is, yeah, it's, I learned a lot about that, but just all the scientific concepts that are rolled into this that you're explaining in a simplified way is just, that's really awesome. I'm very impressed with that. This is broken down into an easily understood way, but there's just so many different concepts that you're hitting on in doing this. This is great. But one question I wanted to ask you. So you said that this kind of stemmed from conversation you had at the conference where you were talking about animation. What time frame? How long did you go from that to this class or whatever?
Let's see. The first teaching was 2023, but this class this year was the first time I ever got, like really thought about it. I've been kind of like kicking around the idea, but I've been so busy with life and everything else, it was just sort of on the back burner this whole time. Each time we had a teach-in, this idea of animation and wanting to show characters in motion or things in motion or how you depict that, it always came up, but I never really had the time or space to really do that. Actually kind of funny. So it was like maybe 3 weeks ago, Chancey texted me and woke me up because she thought that we forgot to tell people about the virtual drawing class. And it was like 4:30 in the morning for me. And I'm like, uh-oh, we forgot. So I like just came up with this idea immediately, like in 20 minutes, just threw it all together. But then I was like, oh, wait, it's actually next week. So starting in 2023, ultimately the whole curriculum came together in 20 minutes, like at 4:30 in the morning.
That's really great. I was also thinking about the students or whatever and them hearing about this. So that's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah, we've been doing some work with comics as ways of kind of storyboarding and thinking about representations and how they can be broken down. Cristina, I see that your hand is up.
Thanks. And congratulations, Marco. I really like the way you explain things. And I think what you are doing is to teach other blind people, right? But I think that your technique will work for everybody because, this is what I do work for a little bit at Universal Design. So what you actually do to explain better to someone, it definitely helps all the students. Have you tried that with more students?
No, this was the first time that I've actually held like a class with it. So if there's ever any opportunities to do that again with a larger class, I'd be happy to do that. Or if we work it into the next teach-in or like a special intermediate teach-in for the tactile drawing course, happy to do that.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. I understand also that you said you have a web page. Would you type it or repeat it for me, please?
Sure. It's blindsvg.com. Scalable Vector Graphics, or Sierra Victor Golf.
Okay, thank you so much.
So that page, that's the page that I built just to teach blind and low vision and anybody really to come in and hand code scalable vector graphics in order to build your own digital graphics or tactile graphics. So it's primarily centered around the idea of you're creating graphics to put through an embosser or a swell form printer or a 3D printer or UV printing. And you're just essentially learning how to do that in lieu of not being able to use Inkscape or Illustrator or any of the vector design tools, or if Tactile View doesn't really work out for you. This is a way to really have a lot of control over exactly what you want to make, provided that you have a means of tactile iteration and you can output it and feel what you're doing and then go back and keep working on it. So that's essentially what Blind SVG is for.
Awesome. Thank you.
One thought that I have was, just as you're explaining it, and yes, it was very clear, though, I'm not sure that I had the right mental model or the correct spatial reference at the right time, right? And just feeling myself kind of building up that literacy in now the second time that I've heard you talking about this. And, I'm kind of curious, as you were teaching, how did you notice, or did you notice anything about the different students grasping of the concept? Or we talk about spatial literacy, or was there any aha moments that were really apparent?
I think it came back to after doing the 8 column for the first time. So again, each column being one frame of the animation, is having one of our students pick up on that, oh, if I draw this on each drawing on one piece of paper, and then that's played back, that becomes the animation. And that was like, I was really, really happy that they made that jump to why we were doing it this way and how it was all working. I think other students, like as they kept going through and drawing more, they were really picking up on that as well. That kind of the concept of this is a tactile way of presenting the idea of persistence of vision. So yeah, I thought that was a fun aha moment.
I wanted to ask you about the experience of perceiving a tactile versus a visual animation. Are there differences because you're going through the tactile modality that influence how you need to design it, or other opportunities of what experiencing an object as the same object even means in those two mediums? Just interested in your reflections about what exploring this has meant for thinking about perception.
Sure. I mean, right now for general visual animation, the only way for those of us who are blind or low vision to really experience it is either audio description. So if you pop on a Pixar film, you're just going to listen to things happening, but you have to use a mixture of both visual context if you have it, or just the breadth of the description to understand what's happening on the screen. There are some tactile, like if you felt like a sculpture in motion, if you have a little robot or something, you can feel it moving around. You might be able to program it to do a few things and understand it that way, getting your hands on it and feeling something actually moving. And now with the advent of the tactile, the Braille displays, the tablet displays, like the APH Monarch and the graffiti, or the dot pad and the graffiti, they actually can show rudimentary animation where this can also go as well. Like this bouncing ball technique, the tablet displays render at about 10 dots per square inch, but it's enough to actually play back drawn frames that you're either doing with your finger and on a subsequent pad, or if you're using like an animated SVG, or if you've happened to build a GIF, you'd be able to feel your own animation working on this dot pad or the tablet display just under your hands. So there are a variety of different ways of being able to experience this. I think for blind people and low vision folks to learn how to make their own animations and do it this way, this would probably be the great time to start as these displays start getting more and more refined with more detail. It'd be just kind of cool to let us participate and be part of that conversation as opposed to letting sighted people do it all for us.
Thanks.
I'm looking at everybody in this call. I'm trying to think about how you're hearing what Marco is sharing and applying it to your own work, or where within your own mental models this work sits. And Sophia, I love that question because you're thinking about embodiment. And as I've known your work, developing these different exercises to support becoming more aware of how their different senses and their movement supports different learning constructs. So that's really cool. If I said that, if I summarize your work, Sophia.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about what this can tell us about how we might think about fostering different spatial concepts in STEM education more broadly.
Yeah, one of the other things that we learn in animation, and this also ties into something that Kai does, is kinesiology. One of the classes I took as an animator was kinesiology, to learn how the body moves. If you know how a body moves, then you can animate that. That also helps you design poses for actions. The idea of embodiment, we would always get up and act out what we wanted to animate. Let's say I wanted to animate a baseball pitch, or maybe just someone throwing a ball. I would actually act out throwing a ball. Well, we would film ourselves doing this and look at play it back and look at the seconds and the timestamp and see exactly, like, if this is time 0 and I throw the ball at like maybe 1.5 seconds, I would break all that down into my motion. Again, the idea of like time lapse and showing the weight or showing the ball dropping and the in-between frames between your keyframes, thinking about embodying movement and motion and drawing your poses, that can go into comics, that can go into direct actions that you want to show, so there are a lot of applications for that. So it's kind of a mix of both tactile art and a little bit of acting and timing, and just kind of paying attention to being aware of your spatial reasoning with your body and your motion and how you can depict that on a piece of paper.
super interesting.
Margaret, do you have any composition ideas, like animation productions that you're wanting to do, or that you're willing to give us a preview of?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I might start back at the beginnings of where we all started with a bouncing ball and trying to see if I can do like an animation loop. I think one of the ideas that also came out of the teach-in is trying to do an intermediate teach-in for folks that have already taken Anne's curriculum course, but want to go a little farther. And one of those things that I thought of was a flour sack. So all that was just drawing a sack of flour, but using the deformation of that to show emotion. So like a pride, like a big puffed up happy flour sack, or a sad depressed flour sack. So showing kind of poses, but then you can kind of derive from that more the idea of those keyframes. So there could be like, I might try doing a bouncing ball. I may try doing a walk cycle of something walking across the screen, or just a character walking in the center of the screen. These are like the basic things that we would start with in animation before I start trying to see if I can do anything a little more advanced. But I also like the idea of one of the things I come back to is bubble letters, which is one of the things that I started drawing the first time Chancey showed me the blackboard, and seeing if I can play around with motion graphics again and hand draw some interesting titles or interesting explorations of moving fonts and moving graphics and stuff on the page. But yeah, so I have to do a lot more work on how to make the drawings, have to make sure that you can feel the difference between each one, and then scanning them in and cleaning them up and making sure that they work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot coming out for that.
Yeah. Now, hi, Marco. I was thinking, I've been working on the book on birds. And I think this is a perfect way to explain the flight of birds, because birds fly in a different way. Some go up and then they lie down, others climb up and stay up for a longer time. It's such a daily concept. Most sighted people, you will ask, how does this bird or that bird fly? I will not be able to tell you, but you notice it. It's very difficult to explain only with static images. But I think that your 8-column or more column approach might work.
Yeah, it definitely would. I mean, you're essentially creating all the keyframes, so the wings up, wings down, and then everything in between to get to that stage. And that will show you how fast the wing is flapping to go from top to bottom. And body movement as well. Like, because I know birds are like, you're kind of down, and then as they flap down, their bodies are a little more up and then down. So you can show all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. And also the comparative speed of some birds, you really hear flip, 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 flip. They fly very quickly.
Yeah,
and others go very majestically. Yes.
Right. You'll actually be happy. Back in college, I created owls. Like, owls were my favorite birds, and I had a bunch of characters called like, the main character was named Hootie. And I did a lot of animation with them, like animating them flying, doing really silly things. It was both in hand-drawn animation like this, and also with like Flash back in the day, like doing Flash animations. Drawing them flying was a lot of fun. I can imagine, having folks feel the progression across a sheet of paper as you get the different drawings. I think that would be wonderful. A really cool thing to experience.
And I see your hand.
Yes.
So, Marco, I was wondering, when you talk about using the pegboard with what kind of paper did you call it?
Oh, so I haven't done it yet, but I just got, on Amazon, I don't remember the name. I can link it to you in our chat, but basically it's a basic peg bar, animation peg bar. I think there are plenty of them online that if you have a 3D printer, you could just get the file and 3D print one. I just bought this for like $7. It's a metal bar. It's flat, and I think this will work great on the. Of course, I don't have my board right next to me. Yeah, so I was going to try taping this to the bottom of the blackboard and then just putting my animation paper on this, and the drawing fills up the rest of the blackboard. So that's all I was going to try.
But what I was wondering is, what did you call the paper that you're using? That is it animation paper?
Yeah, so it's literally animation paper. And this is a 20-pound paper.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about this paper is it's kind of a mixture of tracing paper and drawing paper. So it feels like printer paper, but it does a much better job at being translucent and letting light through, because it's meant to be placed on an animation table which has a light behind it. You know, we did talk about onion skinning and flipping paper. So for sighted people, when they're drawing, of course, you have a drawing on one sheet of paper, you have multiple sheets of paper in your fingers, and you're flipping your fingers back and forth so you can see your animation happening through all the sheets of paper. But for us, you know, we're gonna have to feel it tactily as we go through our drawings. But yeah, so I'm gonna try this on the blackboard, and this should be really fun this should be a really nice way to paper.
So how do you notate it when you have the ball bouncing, you know, on the top left, and then it goes to the middle at the bottom, and then it goes to the top right? How do you notate it? They're each separate, I guess, huh?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the 8-column thing, you're just feeling the columns. But if we're going to full production, if I were going to go and make 8 drawings with 8 sheets of paper, then it's all about organization. You know, we would number our drawings. So you could either do little ticks in the bottom, or you can do an actual number and feel your number, or you can just do it in Braille, you know, just do a quick stab of Braille into it. But yeah, then when you finish your drawing, I would probably layer the next thing, kind of mark out where the next drawing is going to go. Let's try it this way. So I sheet of paper on the board, drawing 1, I draw the ball top center of the paper. Second paper goes on top. I can feel kind of where that drawing is, and then maybe use the pen tip to kind of poke where I want the next drawing to start, and then take both sheets off, put the second sheet down, and then fill in the circle from those points that I put in the paper, and then kind of go forwards that way. So it's a little more work, of course, because that's our way of handling the onion skinning, or being able to see the different sheets of paper through the light. This is us having to feel where the drawing is and sort of tactfully mark out where the next drawing is going to go on the next sheet of paper until you develop all the sheets you need for your animation.
Yeah, really. I just have to try it, because what I'm not getting my head around is when you set up like a camera to take these shots. And I'm just wondering how you go from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of the page. Then you're going to start the next page on the left-hand side.
Next page.
You know, like say the first ball is up the top left, and then it goes to the middle bottom, and then the top right, and then so then you've gone across the width of your frame.
Right. And so if the idea is to just make a quick animation of a ball going from the top left, bounce in the middle, and bounce off to the top right, then that's the length of your animation. If it happens within a second, you're just going to have like a 1-second animation. If you want it to loop, then you just loop it back and forth. So again, 24 frames a second. If I do make 24 drawings, it'll make a really smooth animation. Or we talked about this too in the class, is also called drawing on 2s, where each drawing is held for 2 frames. So instead of 24 drawings, I can draw it in 12 drawings instead of 24. So it's a little more stuttery, but you still get the same idea of the animation. Basically, if the ball bounces in 1 second in 24 frames, then your first page is going to have that ball in the top left, and your final page is going to have that ball in the right side of the sheet of paper. And now you're filling in everything in between to show that ball bouncing with squash and stretch and all the other, you know, things that you want to focus on. That's kind of the whole idea of the animation.
I'll have to sit down and try some.
Yeah.
I'll be in the next class too.
You can talk more about it.
Yeah.
I just Marco, thank you so much. And just as we're just have a few more minutes, I wanted to invite Gordon, since this is your first meeting, it'd be lovely to hear how this resonates with some of the questions that you are working on. But no pressure. I want to provide that opportunity for you to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Marco. So it's a very insightful talk to think how you think about different animation. When you explain your idea, I've been thinking, how could we apply this concept in teaching in other ways? So if you mentioned how could we teach these principles and techniques when teaching things like physics, I've been thinking maybe when teaching topics like acceleration, gravity, maybe there's another way we could like incorporate like what you just mentioned, and then to make these concepts more embodied and more accessible to people who may not be able to see. This is what I've been thinking, and I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on this, but I think this would be something interesting I would take away from your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely a lot of concepts that can be done here. So I think playing around with this idea of the 8 columns and just thinking about how to draw something over and over again on one sheet of paper or longer sheets of paper, large sheets of paper, essentially creating tactile zoetropes, really. That's kind of the whole idea.
That's great. And just one final invitation, Ronnie, I'm kind of curious just how this lands for you with your work in embodiment and embodied AI. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Marcos, thanks a lot for your interesting and explain about the experience. My question is, what do you think about from STEAM education? For example, when you teach or physics or math or science or technology, you can differ in the phenomenological dimensions with the students using different materials, different devices. For example, virtual reality, augmented reality, design, graphic, printing 3D. What do you think about the integration and incorporate different resources, materials in your teach with the students?
I primarily focus on just the tactile drawing parts of it, and figuring out how we can translate what we're creating into these methods that allow us to experience it on tactile displays like the Monarch or things like that. Anything that can accept SVG, scanned artwork, or media like that, I think it would work well. But for augmented reality, it's not really something that I've thought of. It doesn't really tie into what I've been teaching, but it is something that once you learn these concepts, if you're going to do something in that realm, maybe a blind person gets into VR and starts thinking about how something's going to animate through a VR space for something, and they want to participate in that kind of media creation, then learning these concepts, learning the timing, learning how things change over time, that would lend itself really well to that, because timing is everything in so many things. There's a lot of pathways that this really opens up for folks. I'm curious to see how more people take those ideas and apply that to exactly what you said with AR or any other kind of time-based media that this lends itself to.
Marco, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And hopefully we will, all have some examples to show in our next meetings so that we actually apply what you're sharing in practice. So I think that I'm going to just share the Tactile Media Alliance Instagram page. We've just got it unlocked, and want to encourage everybody to follow and share it and contribute to that. We haven't 100% confirmed it, but I think Dorine has offered to speak next month on concepts around representation and developing a shared language. That's a course summary. I think that this is a great community, and thanks everybody for your time, and Marco for your creativity and innovation and engineering. It's so fun to talk to you about these things.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Abby.